Hello and welcome to this short presentation. My name is Dr. Rizwan Mustafa and I'm going to be sharing some thoughts with you in relation to the militant faith proposition as part of our free resource for practitioners in the field of counter-terrorism. So let's get straight into it. Now, before we jump in, there's a couple of documents that are available on our resource space that you may find useful navigating your way through this presentation. The first is the Glossary of Terms, which has been uploaded onto the resource space. And secondly is a document, a short document that was authored in relation to the use of language in the terrorism and counter-terrorism arenas. It challenges the use of the term Islamism and proposes the use of the term fate, which is Faith Alleged Terrorism and Extremism, or terrorists and extremists, in communication of those individuals who utilize a religion or purportedly act in the name of religion to commit acts of terrorism. And the reason why that's relevant is detailed within the document, so I'd encourage everybody to have a read of that once you get a couple of 5 minutes. Now, in that document, it talks specifically about the differences between mainstream normative Muslim Islam and also the militant extreme expression of Islam. And it positions, as does a lot of academic research, it positions how this group of individuals is different from this group of individuals, but it doesn't really go into the detail why. This short presentation will provide you with an insight as to why some of those differences exist. And in particular, it will focus on the militant faith proposition. So let's get straight into it. Okay, so the model that you're looking at now on your screen is perhaps the best embodiment of how faith practitioners, faith alleged terrorism and extremist practitioners view their faith. At the very top, we have the construct of military jihad. Now, jihad is a term that has a long-standing history. It has a genealogy from the time that it was conceived in the Arabian Peninsula all the way through to contemporary usage in 2020. That is beyond the application of violence or beyond a military connotation with which it has almost become ubiquitous. So I've qualified it here with military because the vast majority of militant practitioners or faith practitioners that apply jihad the jihad as an understanding of the use of force and violence. Perhaps at a later time we'll go into details of what the differences are between the two terms, but for all intents and purposes and in understanding this presentation, we're talking about jihad as the use of force or military jihad. Now, the proposition is that military jihad underpins a concept known as Tawheed. Now, Tawheed, loosely translated, means the absolute divinity and the oneness of God Almighty. And if you look at the Glossary of Terms, it gives you a bit more detail in terms of what Tawheed is. But Tawheed, generally speaking, is the center of the Muslim universe. Okay, in Islam, Tawheed is the underpinning concept and component that brings all other realities into existence. And that doesn't really matter if you're Shia Muslim, Sunni Muslim, militant Muslim, non-militant Muslim, whatever it may be. Tawheed is the central foundational block of Islam. And through Tawheed, Islam is realized, meaning that without Tawheed, there can't be any Islam, because Islam is underpinned by this concept. And Islam, incidentally, consists of your prayers, your fasting, your pilgrimage, your alms, and any other worship, designated or non-designated, that is considered as or falls under the broad umbrella of Islam. So you begin to see the centrality of this construct, certainly within the militant faith proposition, how military jihad really underpins pretty much everything in their universe and in their existence. Because without military jihad, there can't be Tawheed, and without Tawheed, there can't be Islam, and without Islam, there is no fasting, there are no prayers, there is no Hajj, there are no alms, there is no worship in any sense that can be realized or that can be achieved. Now, the reason why this is relevant and important is because when you ask yourself the question, or you ask the question, well, from a theological perspective, why are individuals here? Why do you exist? The broad purpose of creation question. Have a think about that in a 10-minute presentation. What's the purpose of life? Now, broadly speaking, and very, very, very simplified, the purpose of life is to attain paradise from a Muslim theological perspective, Islamic theological perspective. The purpose of existence, the reason why God created us, was to attain paradise. and my research talks about this in much more detail, but for a short presentation, the purpose of human existence is to attain paradise. But paradise can't be attained unless you adhere to the commands and the imperatives of Islam. So if you're a good Muslim, then the hope is, the expectation is that you'll be granted paradise. Yet in the militant proposition, Islam can't exist without military jihad. So military jihad is absolutely necessary in order to attain paradise. The very salvation of the individual who holds this belief is contingent upon the understanding that if you perform military jihad, then you fulfill your obligation of Islam, through which you can attain paradise, which is the reason why you were created. So the centrality of jihad is at the very core of the individual belief. Not only the belief of militant faith proposition of Islam, but the individual who subscribes and ascribes to that belief system as well. That in order for me to fulfill my individual responsibility, the reason why God created me, I need to adhere to his commands. And the reason why I'm adhering to his commands through the construct of Islam is so that I can go to paradise and be successful. I don't want to go to hell and I don't want to be unsuccessful. But the proposition is that I can't achieve any of this unless I embark on military jihad. So military jihad gives a reality to all of my other actions. Everything that I want to do, everything that I need to do, needs to happen or can only happen if I embark on military jihad. So you begin to understand the centrality of military jihad as it is positioned in the militant faith proposition. And these are imperatives that are communicated from the time of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, and the incarnation of what is now referred to as Wahhabism. And these terms are loaded in the problematic. I don't particularly like them, but for the purposes of understanding, from the time of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab all the way through Abdullah Azzam, Ibn al-Zawahiri, Sayyid Qutb, all those kind of key individuals and key people as ideologues have fashioned and shaped this notion that jihad is central to the purpose and reality of Islam. And without Islam, you can't fulfill your wider theological obligation, which means that you're never going to be successful. And if you're never going to be successful from a theological perspective, that means that you face the prospect of damnation in hell. Yeah. So this is how the proposition is created. And my research talks about this in much, much, much more detail. Okay, but for the purposes of understanding, you begin to appreciate how central in the militant proposition military jihad has been positioned. Yeah. Now, when that is the case, here's a question for those folks who work in the criminal justice system, who work in the rehabilitative space, who work with offenders, CTAC offenders, offender managers. Is rehabilitation possible? Now, when you ask yourself that question, it's important to understand that terrorism, as you will well be aware, is a multifaceted, multidimensional phenomenon. Okay, and there's people that have written about this at great depths and detail. There's been individual researchers who have gone into the field in Syria and Iraq, spoken to people who have supported regimes like ISIS around their motivations for doing so. And you quickly begin to understand that some of these motivations have been political, some of these motivations have been economic, some of these motivations have been apathy and grievance, some of these motivations have been psychological, mental health instability. So it's a multifaceted problem. But within all of that, there are some individuals who actually absolutely believe that the military proposition or the military component of jihad is central to their existence in the material realm and also their well-being in the spiritual realm. So it is the central component of their Islam. And those are the folks that we're talking about, because rehabilitation may well work with individuals who have a misguided understanding of faith at the very superficial level. It will work with those individuals who don't have prospects. It will work with those individuals who perhaps have kind of other psychological, social issues going on in their background. But for those folks that we deal with in the criminal justice system and in rehabilitative programs, in offender managers and within the prison service, for those folks who absolutely believe this to their core, is rehabilitation possible for them? And that's the question I'd like to pose. But whilst you're deliberating that, let me ask you a question. Let me put you into this mix. Position yourself and think about something that you believe in, something that is absolutely dear to you, something that you would quite happily lay your life down for. Now, whether that's your children, whether that's your partner, whether that's your family, whether that's your football team, whatever it may be, something that you would absolutely, unequivocally, without question, lay your life down for, because you believe absolutely to your core, you believe that this is worth dying for. Your family's worth dying for. Your children are worth dying for. Now, when that's the case and you've got that reality in your mind, what would it take for someone like me to convince you that it's not worth dying for? That your children aren't worth dying for, your family's not worth dying for, the very core of what you believe, what you consider to be absolute reality, isn't worth dying for. And whilst you're thinking about that, let's have a look at these folks. Individuals on rehabilitative programs who held that intrepid belief that military jihad defines the core of their being. It not only defines the core of their being, it brings together every other reality within their Muslim Islamic universe through the construct of Tawheed, which allows them to practice their Islam. And what would it take for these kind of folks to give that up? Because jihad is central to their understanding. Now, this is a long and deep conversation, which we don't have time to go into in this particular presentation, but it's certainly food for thought and things to consider when we're engaging with, dealing with individuals who understand the construct of their faith to be principled upon this paradigm, to be principled upon the understanding that military jihad brings all other realities to life. And what would it take for people in our position to be able to convince those individuals to give it up? And is it at all possible? Folks, that's the end of the presentation. It was, as mentioned, just things to consider and to highlight some of the challenges of what we're dealing with, especially when we look at the rehabilitative spaces and the offender management spaces. My name's been Dr. Rizwan Mustafa. It's been an absolute privilege. If you have any questions, please feel free to email us at info@calmarina.com, or alternatively, have a look at our resource space on Calmarina. You'll find lots more useful stuff there. Thank you.